There comes a moment in life when a person looks into the mirror and quietly asks, "Do I still matter?" Not because they are weak, not because they failed, but because the world suddenly becomes quieter around them. The phone rings less. People stop asking for advice. Friends slowly disappear. And one day, without warning, a person who once carried an entire family on their shoulders begins to feel invisible. But what if growing older is not the end of importance? What if it is the beginning of true freedom? What if the most peaceful, powerful, and meaningful years of your life are still waiting for you? Today's story is not just about aging. It is about confidence. It is about dignity. It is about learning that your value does not disappear with gray hair, wrinkles, or retirement. And by the end of this story, you may never look at growing older the same way again. Michael Turner was 72 years old when he realized he had forgotten how to smile. Every morning, he followed the same routine. Wake up at 6, sit quietly on the edge of the bed, take his medicine with a glass of water, walk slowly to the kitchen, make coffee, and stare out the window while the world rushed past him. Cars moved fast outside. Young people jogged with headphones in their ears. Children laughed on their way to school. Everyone seemed busy. Everyone seemed needed, except him. There was a time when Michael was the strongest man in the room. For 40 years, he worked as a construction supervisor in Chicago. He built houses, schools, and office buildings. People respected him. His workers listened when he spoke. His children admired him. His wife, Anna, always told him, "You make people feel safe." And for most of his life, Michael believed that was his purpose: to provide, to protect, to solve problems. But life changed quickly after retirement. At first, he thought it would feel relaxing. No alarms, no deadlines, no pressure. But after a few months, silence slowly entered his life like a cold wind through an open door. His children became busy with their own families. His friends stopped visiting as often. Some moved away. Some passed away. And then came the hardest moment of all. 2 years earlier, his wife Anna died after a long battle with illness. The house that once felt warm suddenly felt empty. Michael still kept her favorite cup beside the sink, still folded her blanket neatly every morning, still looked at her chair during dinner, as if part of him expected her to walk back into the room, but she never did. And little by little, Michael stopped living. He existed, but he no longer felt alive. One rainy afternoon, Michael sat alone in his living room watching old television reruns he did not even care about. The sound played in the background, but his mind was somewhere else. He looked around the room and whispered quietly, "What am I supposed to do now?" No one answered. For the first time in his life, Michael felt lost. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. Deep inside, he felt like his purpose had expired, like the world had moved on without him. That evening, his daughter Emily called him. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked gently. "I'm fine," Michael replied automatically. But Emily knew that voice. The short answers, the tired tone, the silence between words. "Dad," she said softly, "when was the last time you went outside for something other than groceries?" Michael laughed quietly. "I don't know. You should join a club or a group. Meet people." "At my age?" he said. "Yes, at your age." Michael shook his head. "People my age don't start over, Emily." There was a long silence on the phone. Then Emily said something he would never forget. "Dad, growing older does not mean your story is over. It just means you're in a different chapter." That sentence stayed in his mind all night. A different chapter. The next morning, Michael stood by the window again with his coffee. But this time, he noticed something unusual. Across the street, an old man around his age was helping a little girl ride a bicycle. The girl was scared. She kept wobbling side to side. But the old man smiled patiently. "Keep going," he encouraged her. "You can do it." The little girl laughed nervously and kept pedaling. Michael watched them for several minutes. And suddenly, something happened inside him. A memory. He remembered teaching his own son how to ride a bicycle nearly 40 years earlier. The laughter, the fear, the pride. For the first time in months, Michael smiled slightly. A small smile, but real. That afternoon, he decided to do something different. Nothing dramatic, just different. He walked to the local community center. As he entered the building, he immediately felt uncomfortable. Groups of people were talking, laughing, and participating in activities. Some were painting. Some were dancing. Others were exercising slowly with instructors. Michael almost turned around and left. I don't belong here, he thought. But before he could leave, a cheerful woman at the front desk smiled warmly. First time here? Michael nodded awkwardly. She handed him a brochure. We have veterans groups, walking clubs, woodworking classes, and volunteer programs. Volunteer programs. That phrase caught his attention. What kind of volunteer programs? He asked. Well, she smiled, we have a mentorship program for young teenagers who need guidance. Michael hesitated. Guidance. For years, people came to him for guidance. Could he still do that? Or was he too old now? The woman noticed his uncertainty. You'd be surprised, she said kindly. Young people still need wisdom. Michael signed up before he could change his mind. The following Tuesday, he arrived at the youth center feeling nervous. He had supervised hundreds of workers in his lifetime, but this felt harder, because this time, he was not trying to build buildings. He was trying to rebuild himself. Inside the center, teenagers sat around tables looking bored and distracted. Some stared at their phones. Some avoided eye contact completely. Michael wondered if this had been a mistake. Then a young boy, around 15 years old, sat across from him. His name was Daniel. Thin, quiet, eyes full of anger and exhaustion. Michael tried to start a conversation. So, what do you enjoy doing? Daniel shrugged. Nothing. Michael nodded slowly. That answer sounded familiar. For the next few weeks, their conversations remained awkward. Daniel barely spoke. Michael struggled to connect, but something kept bringing him back. Maybe because he recognized pain in that boy's eyes. The same loneliness he carried himself. One afternoon, while working on a small woodworking project together, Daniel suddenly asked, Do you ever feel like nobody cares if you're around? Michael stopped moving. The question hit him hard. He looked at the teenager carefully, and instead of giving advice immediately, he answered honestly, Yes. Daniel looked surprised. You? Michael nodded. More times than you can imagine. For the first time, Daniel looked directly into his eyes. And in that quiet moment, two lonely people from completely different generations understood each other. Week after week, their bond grew stronger. Michael taught Daniel woodworking skills, how to measure carefully, how to stay patient, how to fix mistakes instead of hiding them. But slowly, the lessons became deeper than wood and tools. Michael began teaching him about life, about responsibility, about self-respect, about surviving difficult seasons. And something unexpected started happening. The more Michael helped Daniel heal, the more he healed himself. He began waking up with purpose again. He started shaving regularly, cooking proper meals, taking longer walks. He even started laughing again, not because life became perfect, but because he finally felt useful again. One evening, Daniel said something that nearly brought tears to Michael's eyes. You remind me of the grandfather I never had. Michael looked away for a moment, trying to hide his emotions. Because after years of feeling forgotten, those words made him feel seen again, valued again, alive again. And for the first time since Anna passed away, Michael no longer felt like life was ending. He began to understand something powerful. Growing older was not stealing his value. It was revealing a different kind of strength. A quieter strength, a wiser strength, a strength the world desperately needed. But life was about to test him one more time. And the challenge ahead would force Michael to make a decision that would change not only his future, but Daniel's future too. A few weeks later, winter arrived in Chicago. The cold winds became stronger. The streets became quieter. And one evening, Michael noticed something unusual. Daniel did not show up at the youth center. At first, Michael thought maybe the boy was sick. But then, another week passed. Still no Daniel. Michael felt worried. The staff at the center explained that Daniel had been missing classes at school, too. He's having problems at home again. one counselor said quietly. Michael nodded slowly. But deep inside, something felt wrong. That night, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the boy's question from weeks earlier. Do you ever feel like nobody cares if you're around? Michael understood now. Sometimes people do not need money. Sometimes they do not even need solutions. Sometimes they simply need one person who refuses to give up on them. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He put on his heavy coat, grabbed Daniel's address from the center, and drove across town through the snow. The neighborhood looked worn down. Broken fences, old apartment buildings, silent streets. When Michael knocked on the apartment door, no one answered at first. Then slowly, the door opened. Daniel stood there wearing the same hoodie Michael had seen him wear many times before. His eyes looked tired, embarrassed, defeated. "Why are you here?" Daniel asked quietly. Michael looked at him for a moment before answering. "Because someone should be." The boy looked down at the floor. Inside the apartment, everything felt heavy. Unwashed dishes, dark rooms, cold silence. Michael recognized that feeling immediately. It was the feeling of people who had stopped believing tomorrow could be better. Daniel sat down on the couch and finally spoke. "My mom lost her job," he said softly. "Things got bad again." Michael listened carefully. No food in the fridge sometimes, bills piling up. My mom crying at night thinking I can't hear her. His voice cracked, slightly. "And honestly, I just stopped caring about school." Michael sat quietly beside him. Years ago, he would have tried to fix everything immediately. But age had taught him something important. People heal faster when they feel understood before they feel advised. After a long silence, Michael finally spoke. "You know something, Daniel?" "What?" "There were moments in my life when I thought I was finished too." Daniel looked at him carefully. "After my wife died, I stopped caring about almost everything." Michael's voice became softer. "I thought my useful years were over. I thought getting old meant becoming invisible." Daniel listened without interrupting. "But I was wrong," Michael continued. "Pain can convince you that your story is ending when it's actually preparing you for a new beginning." The room became quiet again. Snow fell gently outside the window. Then Michael stood up slowly. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "You'll see." They drove back to Michael's house together. For the first time, Daniel entered the home where Michael had spent decades with Anna. The same house that once felt empty now suddenly felt alive again. Michael walked into the garage workshop. Old tools hung neatly on the walls. Wood pieces rested on shelves. The smell of fresh cedar filled the room. Michael handed Daniel a piece of sandpaper. "Today," he smiled slightly, "we build something." For hours, they worked side by side, cutting wood, measuring carefully, fixing mistakes, talking about life. And little by little, the darkness inside Daniel began to lift. At one point, Daniel asked quietly, "How do you stay strong after losing so much?" Michael stopped working for a moment. Then he answered honestly, "You don't stay strong every day." Daniel looked confused. Michael smiled gently. "Some days, you feel tired. Some days, you feel broken. Some days, you question everything." He placed the wood carefully onto the table. But confidence is not believing life will always be easy. He looked directly at Daniel. Confidence is believing you can keep going, even when life becomes difficult. Those words stayed in the air. Simple, but powerful. Over the next several months, everything slowly began changing. Daniel returned to school. His grades improved. He spent less time with negative influences and more time learning skills in Michael's workshop. Meanwhile, Michael transformed too. He no longer spent mornings staring hopelessly out the window. Now he woke up with plans, purpose, and urge. He joined more community programs, started teaching woodworking classes for seniors and teenagers together. People admired him again. But this time, it felt different. When he was younger, people respected his strength. Now they respected his wisdom. And Michael realized something beautiful. Growing older had not made him weaker. It had made him deeper. One spring afternoon, the community center organized a small event for local families. Students displayed projects they had worked on during the mentorship program. Michael walked through the crowded room quietly, observing the smiling faces around him. Then he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. At the center of the room stood a wooden bench, beautifully crafted, smooth edges, strong legs, polished carefully. A small engraved message sat at the top. "To the man who taught me not to give up." Michael stared at the bench silently. Daniel stepped forward nervously. "I made it for you," he said. Michael's eyes filled with tears. For several seconds, he could not speak, because in that moment, he realized something life-changing. Aging is not about losing your worth. It is about discovering how much your experience can mean to someone else. The room applauded softly, but Michael barely heard it. His mind traveled back through the years, the long workdays, the struggles, the grief after losing Anna, the lonely mornings, the empty silence. And suddenly, all of it made sense. Every painful chapter had shaped him into someone capable of helping another human being survive their own storm. That night, Michael sat alone on his porch, watching the sunset. But this time, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. He looked at the sky and smiled quietly, not because life had become perfect, but because he finally understood something many people never learn. Your value does not disappear with age. Your wrinkles are proof you survived. Your gray hair is proof you gained wisdom. Your slower steps are proof you kept walking through difficult years. And confidence in old age is not about pretending to be young again. It is about standing proudly inside the life you earned. Michael closed his eyes for a moment and remembered Anna's voice. "You make people feel safe." For the first time in years, he believed those words again. And maybe that is the real secret to growing older with confidence. Not chasing youth, not fearing time, but realizing that even now, your presence, your wisdom, and your story still matter more than you know. So if you are growing older and wondering whether your best years are behind you, remember this: the world still needs your experience, still needs your kindness, still needs your voice. And sometimes, the strongest people are not the ones who run the fastest. They are the ones who continue showing up for life after heartbreak, loss, failure, and pain. Age is not the end of purpose. It is the beginning of legacy. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful motivational stories. And always remember, growing older is a privilege. Growing older with confidence is a choice.